To imagine that the person, or more accurately, the personality that we mistakenly take ourselves to be, is in some way responsible for the natural flow of life, that can in some way influence the irresistible flow of the entire universe, is the height of delusion, of self-delusion. It represents the pinnacle of the mind's illusory and imagined sense of itself, a sense of self that imagines itself to be separate to the entirety of the world, and even though it is relatively insignificant as a body-mind that sees itself separate to the entirety of the world, it imagines itself to have the power to influence the flow of life. It imagines itself to be important enough to be able to be responsible for its own destiny, to have some influence over its own destiny. And what it fails to understand is that life, the appearance of life, is a representation of the entirety of the universe. And this separate sense of ourself that we have mistaken ourselves to be exists only in suffering. It is an activity of the mind that is either moving towards life and how life represents itself or presents itself, or away from how life is experienced. And it is only in these activities of moving away or towards life, which is ultimately suffering, because it's either trying to cling to the good or push away the bad, and it only exists within this activity. And this is not what you are. You have mistaken yourself to be something that comes and goes, something that appears when it is having a relationship with life and disappears. But you are the ever-present presence that knows the personality. You are the permanent knowing of the world. You are the natural flow of the world. You are this irresistible flow of the universe, experiencing itself. You are the knowing that knows the personality, that knows the body-mind. That knows the world, but the world is an experience of yourself. And that experience of the world is made of knowing. And so knowing is knowing itself. And it is only from an illusory and imagined point of view that there could be the belief that something separate from the entirety of life could in some way influence the entire flow of life. But you are this flow. You are the knowing of life. And the knowing that knows all experience is the same knowing. There is not two or more knowings. There is the same knowing of itself as an experience of the world. And so to imagine that you can in some way influence your own destiny as something separate to the entirety is so nonsensical that it can only exist in a virtual and illusory reality as the mind. And in a relative sense, although this really needs to be qualified, the personality that we have mistaken ourselves to be only has a choice about how it experiences life. But this is very much based on its conditioning, collective conditioning, collective experiencing, and its general programming. But it can either choose to be a separate someone and form a relationship with life that wishes it to be in some way different to its natural flow, or it can soften its sense of itself so beautifully that it becomes life, that it experiences itself as the natural flow of life, that it is not separate from, and that it is within this natural flow simply and beautifully experiencing itself as life itself. And that is really the only apparent choice that the separate self is offered by life. To become aligned as life itself, or to imagine itself separate to life, and in some way able to influence its own separate destiny. Life is not ultimately about getting something or having a purpose or achieving some success. It is ultimately about realizing that we are this flow of life, imagining or mistakenly believing that we are separate to it. And when this is truly realized and life is met with loving acceptance, then it becomes the true beautiful miracle that it is.